You know, being a Mizzou fan is pretty hard. It's a pretty hard thing, and it's hard to stay continuing doing it over time. And I'll say this. I went down to St. Louis for the bragging rights matchup between the Fighting Illini and the Missouri Tigers a couple weeks ago. And wow, to say I was embarrassed is a complete and utter understatement. Walking home, walking back to the hotel, I was not the best to be around. My parents, my brother would attest to that. And I was truly embarrassed after that 43-point loss to the Illini. However, my mom asked me a question on that night. She asked, "Are you going to be a Mizzou fan tomorrow?" And my answer to that was, you know, I wish I wasn't, but I am. And that's how I am. But, that promise, I woke up the next day and I was a Missouri Tigers fan. I put that game, and as it went farther and farther, it was in the rearview mirror. And last night, the Tigers defeated the 22nd ranked reigning national champion, Florida Gators. And this was an incredibly close game and truly a must win for Missouri to start SEC play. Now, you may be wondering, Ben, I thought this was a college football show. Why are you talking about college basketball? And if you didn't know I was talking about college basketball, well, then you're not paying enough attention. Well, if you were thinking that way, that this is a college football show, you would be wrong. And on the Ben Drury Show, we talk about all sports on all levels, from college football, college basketball, heck, the MLB, and even later in the spring, we'll talk about track and field on Kicking for Home Track and Field Media. The Ben Drury Show covers it all. And today, we'll be talking about college basketball. And now, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing this intro is going on a little bit too long. So let's just start. I'm Ben Drury, and make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Get those post notifications on, so whenever a most recent episode of the Ben Drury Show comes out, you are right there on it. But without further ado, this is the Ben Drury Show, so don't go anywhere. Wow. 76-74 was the final score in the matchup between, I already said it, the 22nd ranked Florida Gators and the unranked 10-3 Missouri Tigers. Now 11-3 Missouri Tigers. And to say that Mizzou is undefeated in SEC play is a great feeling. And you might be wondering, wow, how long has the season gone on? It hasn't. This was the first game of SEC play. But still, to start it undefeated, this is a truly great thing to say. And this was not an easy game whatsoever for Missouri Tigers. This was not a matter of, okay, Florida is going to come into our home arena, not Faurot Field. Whoa. They're going to come into Mizzou Arena, and it's just going to be a cakewalk for us. And it's going to be easy for the Mizzou Tigers basketball team, Dennis Gates' squad, to come out with a win. And this game was anything but. It was up and down. At one point, Florida was up by 8. And to be honest, I was at this game. And to be honest, I'll be honest with you, I was not confident whatsoever in Mizzou winning this matchup at that point in the game. Does that speak to how much of a fan I am? No, that's just how being a Missouri Tigers fan works. And like I said, this was a must-win for Mizzou. Not only because it gets them undefeated in SEC, not only because it's the third straight year that they beat Florida, and Florida was national champion last year, all of these different factors. That's not why. This is a true confidence boost for this Missouri Tigers team. And not even just confidence, I would say momentum as well. Coach Dennis Gates, he's done a lot. I think this is 4th or 5th year in Columbia, and his teams thrive on momentum. Their stretch last year where they beat multiple top 15 teams, that was because momentum was going their way. And this matchup gives them momentum. And I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to get more into the specifics of this game. And one of the points I want to open up with this is this. In the bragging rights game, the most recent matchup before this game, Missouri lacked offensive identity. And I put out a tweet, anger tweeting, and you can follow my Twitter. I put out a tweet and it said that you cannot have any success in basketball on any level if you have no identity on offense. And that Mizzou had no offensive identity. But what does that mean? Well, it's truly understanding, okay, what is our makeup as a team? And that could be as simple as, okay, do we know that we have more three-point shooters? And we see great teams do this, where if they are a team comprised of majority three-point shooters, you will see them cater their offenses to getting three-point shots open. Now, Mizzou isn't necessarily, they don't necessarily fit that bill. They were 36% from three-point land in this matchup against Florida. So that on any measure, they're a pretty mediocre team shooting the three-point ball. They make 8 3-pointers and miss 14 of them. So they're not the best team in the country, three-point wise. Now, so on those standards, I would not say that they're a great three-point shooting team, that they should be catering to that. And then on the flip side, and long story short, I will get to the end, but on the other side, okay, do we have a bigger roster? Which I would say Mizzou leans towards that build a little bit more. Where, okay, if we have a bigger team, size-wise, if we have a bigger team, then we need to feed the ball down low and we need to cater our offense to getting open looks down low in the painted area. And in that Illinois matchup, and frankly, multiple games earlier in the season, Mizzou couldn't decide which one they wanted to be. And here's the thing, is that shots will not, this is just a common truth. This is the most common sense argument in basketball, in sports, or in life in general. Everything isn't always going to go well. More specifically, you're not always going to make shots. And specifically within that, you're not always going to be able to make three-point field goals at the snap of the fingers. Right? And so Mizzou even whenever those shots aren't falling, they continue to try and find those three-point shots. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you, if you're missing a shot, you need to just stop shooting. I think, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And there are some times where you can shoot really, really bad to start the game, and then the second half, you shoot lights out. That wasn't the case in that matchup, but it is important in offensive identity to cut down to what my answer was. That was a little bit long-winded. But it is knowing, all right, what are our strengths and what are our flaws? And if something is going wrong, then we need to go away from that and use it to the best of our advantage. And I'm not going to stand here and say that this matchup, Florida and Missouri, this game from Missouri was an example of perfect offensive identity. It was anything but. However, it was a step in the right direction for the Tigers. And so what I think the offensive identity should look like is this. If you're looking at the Missouri roster, they have multiple players. They don't have too many true guards. They maybe have, as I'm looking at their roster, they maybe have a handful, 3 or 4 players who fit the true guard build. So we're looking at T.O. Barrett, Honor Boateng, Sebastian Mack, that's 3. And then we got Anthony Robinson, Aaron Stone, Jaden Stone, and Aaron Rose. So that's 6. And Aaron Rose injured right now. So we have 6 players on the roster who are true guards. And probably within that, there's an even smaller subsection of that who fits the point guard build. So if you look at the opposite side of that, that means that the majority of the team are bigs, and not only just like power forwards, small forwards, but they are center-sized players. Trent Burns, Trent Pierce. And here's the thing. This game, Florida and Missouri, the first half ended with Trent Burns making a buzzer beater 3 to tie the game. And that is what a lot of those bigs are able to do. They're able to shoot the ball well. And so offensive identity, Dennis Gates needs to know that and not attack that as their sole offense. Now, this is what I mean. So you should run an offense where, okay, our key purpose is to get the ball inside and favor those mismatches inside and, try and get the ball to Mark Mitchell down low and have him go to work down there in the paint. But here's the thing, and this is what can make Mizzou dangerous, is that if you put a big lineup on the court all at once, then it allows, okay, if a channel is cut off inside, kick it out, get it going again, and maybe you can open a three-point shot that hopefully would go in. So that is what an offensive identity will look like for this Missouri team. And that wasn't very specific. But Mizzou, and Dennis Gates more specifically, he has the steps, and I think if he followed that blueprint a little bit better, they could have a little bit more success. And they could pick whatever offensive scheme they want. But they need to remember the fundamental truths of this Missouri roster should be that. And so back a little bit after that tangent, back more into this matchup against Florida. And so going into this matchup, and one of the reasons that made Florida so good last season and still why they are pretty good this year is Alex Condon and Thomas Houck. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Both from Australia. And I believe in this matchup, they combined for, as I do some quick math, they combined for 38 points. 38 points, Alex Condon and Thomas Houck. So I was a little bit worried for Mizzou being able to defend those bigs. And Thomas Houck got his. He had 24 points, 9 of 20 shooting, which I think that was the biggest statistic that points out. He could have finished easily with 30 to, 35 points, depending on if he just made 5 more of those field goals. 14 of 20, which would be, not the wildest success in the field goal category. And why I was worried about this was if you once again look at that Illinois game, which is really Missouri's only test this year, Mizzou had a lot of struggles defending those bigs, whether it be Tomislav Ivisic or Zvonimir Ivisic or Ben Hummerkaus, who all of these players, they had struggled defending those people. And Mizzou was able in this matchup to slow down those bigs, which I think is what they really are going to have to do the rest of the season. Because it's okay if you give up some points occasionally, but you can't let them score at will, which is what Mizzou didn't allow Florida to do in this matchup, which is really one of the main takeaways I take from this game. And what allowed Missouri to come away with this win was not shooting. As I already mentioned, they went 36% from the three-point land and 45% from field goal range from the field. So, and on any measure of success shooting wise, they didn't shoot the lights out in Mizzou Arena. But what did and allowed Mizzou to win this game was their half-court defense, and what I kind of just touched on a little bit earlier, where they made Florida uncomfortable. And I talked a lot about this. It's applicable to college football, any sport. A success for a team is making the other team play how you want them to play. And what that looked like in this game was Mizzou forcing Florida to take the three-point shot, forcing them outside, because Florida shot horribly from three-point land, just over 25%. So Mizzou played into that very well and made Florida play into their weaknesses, which is a big, big thing that allowed for Mizzou to win this game. Was not only limiting Thomas Houck and Alex Condon, but not allowing players to get really hot. Xavier Lead had a few three-pointers to start the game, but that's really all we heard from him. Princeton transfer, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, beat Mizzou in the second round of the NCAA tournament 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago. So Mizzou forced Florida to play the way Mizzou wanted the Gators to play. And to Todd Golden's credit, he was still able to get his team close in this game. Todd Golden, the head coach of the Gators. To lose just by 2 points whenever you played a really, in Florida's eyes, I mean, Missouri didn't play the best game ever, but Florida played a bad game. So Mizzou scrapes this one out. Their biggest lead at that point was 10 points. They had a 10-point lead at one point. There was a couple times where Mizzou tried to lose it, but they came out on top. And my final thoughts about this game, and then we're going to close the episode as we approach the 15-minute mark, is that going forward, Mizzou's schedule doesn't get easy. No team in the SEC schedule is easy down the stretch. That's just how good of an SEC how good SEC basketball is. And what Mizzou is gonna need to do down the stretch is just what they did in this Florida game. And I didn't even touch on it. Bad free throw shooting for Mizzou. They missed 12 free throws in this matchup. We could have easily, well, obviously, it's not as simple as this, but if they make just half of those free throws that they missed, they could win a little bit more comfortably. And so the number one thing would be down the stretch, they need to make their field goals. Another thing is that they need to continue to have, one, that offensive identity, and two, they need to force the other team to play the way they want them to play. Because here's the thing. If Mizzou does that on a mediocre shooting night, 36% from three and 45% from the field, which mediocre, probably higher mediocre, but not perfect. Well, not even perfect, but not the best, is that field goal shooting will come. 3-point shooting with the roster that Mizzou has, it will come. Jacob Cruz had not a very good night from the field. So if Jacob Cruz gets on fire, that's going to be great. But it needs to be combined with great play on defense. And that doesn't necessarily mean forcing so many turnovers, but it just means making teams shoot late into the shot clock. There was multiple times in this game for Florida where they were near shot clock violations, and Mizzou made them uncomfortable and made them take shots that Florida didn't want to take. So Mizzou needs to make teams do that going forward down the stretch into SEC play. And if they want to make the NCAA tournament, it's going to be essential for Mizzou to do that. With that being said, that's all we have for Missouri basketball, college basketball on today's episode of the Ben Drury Show. Just to tell you what's going to happen, what's coming up next for the Ben Drury Show. Tomorrow, I start second semester of high school, so who knows what'll happen with how much we get out for the Ben Drury Show. However, I would like to get an episode out maybe once a week, twice a week, and that would be a big plus. And we're gonna focus heavily on college football as the college football playoff wraps up. Go Ole Miss Rebels, mixing Missouri and Ole Miss, my two teams. And we'll have a lot of content about that. We're going to have a show about the BTN, their unveil of the most recent BTN Top 25. We're going to give the BTN's input on those college football playoff semifinals games and many more stuff like that. So with that being said, that's all we have for today's episode of the Ben Drury Show. I'm Ben Drury. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe for future updates on the channel. And once again, thanks so much. Good night.